Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality, pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on X, and also on TikTok. Folks, please do send in your comments. Please do send in your questions. Please tell us where you are watching from on this January evening. Our 166th episode of Good Evening Britain. And tonight at the bottom of the hour, we will have as our guest a good friend of the show, our man on the Mersey, Damien Davies of the YouTube channel CheshireCatMusings. And Damien's always got a lot to say about what's going on. He is one of the Reform Party members down there or up there, wherever you may be based at the moment, in Runcorn and Helmsby, which is actually the seat of one of the Reform MPs. And so he'll be bringing us the latest on what's happening there, and we'll be discussing with him the latest British politics as well. Always an insightful commentator with a lot to say is Damien Davies. He'll be at the bottom of the hour. Now, folks, please do, if you're watching on X, please just hit that repost button and give us a repost, or give us a quote repost with something like, "Watch this show, it's amazing." And that really helps if you do that. It helps the algorithm to know what's going on. And if you're on YouTube, give us a like, give us a share, give us a follow. Similarly, on Facebook and on TikTok, please give us a like, folks. And Tab from Liverpool says he's watching from Liverpool. Fantastic. Good to hear from you. We are an organisation that supports the maintenance of the UK Union, the Union of Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales. And we've been going since March 2012, Tab. I hope you're down with that. And I hope you know that's what's up, as they say, as the kids say these days. So seriously, let's get into the meat and potatoes of what we want to talk about. And the so-called Scottish government, better known as the Scottish Executive, they held a budget yesterday, a pre-Holyrood election budget. Now, remember that the Holyrood election and the Welsh election also will be in less than 4 months' time, on Thursday, the 7th of May. And it's going to be a very serious election because it's going to determine the makeup, obviously, of the various devolved parliaments. And it might even bring in a new tranche of new people from, well, the big story, of course, is reform. We'll be talking about Damien. We'll be talking to Damien about that at the bottom of the hour, but it's going to bring in, hopefully, some new ideas. In particular, I would like to think that it's going to force the SNP to start talking about properly exploiting Scotland's natural fossil fuels. Scotland's suffering at the moment because we have an executive which doesn't properly appreciate the power that can be generated from Scotland's fossil fuels. And as a consequence, our cost of living increases, because if the cost of energy is high, then that means that the cost of fertilizer is high, because fertilizer is made from oil and fossil fuels. And so that means the cost of producing our goods every day, our milk, our eggs, our bread, our meat especially, is going to increase as well. So if you have high energy costs, you have high food costs. One follows the other. And it does appear that the SNP is simply prepared to collapse the Scottish economy because it does not have a proper energy policy, and it will lose out on that as well. And that really, this point really does need to be emphasized, that you can talk all you want about climate change and the so-called, which doesn't exist, climate emergency, which is not an emergency at all. You can talk all about that all you want, but at the end of the day, you need to be able to put food on people's tables, and you need people to be able to heat their homes and so on. And all of that comes right now from exploiting Scotland's natural fossil fuels. And as for things like green energy, fine, but there has to be very much second tier. You can't put it first tier without getting the basics correct. Okay, so yeah, fine. Develop green energy all you want, but make sure that your priority is always developing the endless, boundless fossil fuels opportunities that exist, especially around the entire coast of the United Kingdom and indeed in the actual land itself. So that's one thing that they're going to fall down on. The other thing, of course, is their position on open borders. They wouldn't say it like this, but they don't care about border control, and they don't care about replacing the native Scots with basically the rest of the world if it appears to serve the economy, which is to say numbers on a piece of paper. So they're going to fall down on that because for the first time, perhaps ever, they've got serious opposition in the shape of reform. And I should say that we don't support any particular party, but we do look at what's happening out there and we describe it to you, whether people want to hear it or not. You will get the full I'm not even going to go for what the word was I was trying to think of, but the full story basically from us here in from A Force for Good. So let's just say hello to a few people who came in. Oksana was first in tonight, says hi all, followed by Rafa, who is a regular on the show, who says hello everybody here in the channel. The Many Faces of Ego, thanks for coming back in for a second week, says greetings fellow unionists. And also to our man Nick, good evening to you, Nick. And we'll be working with Nick again this year, and we look forward to doing so. And We Say It podcast reposted this stream on X. So folks, if you're on X, give it a repost. Derek, all the best to you in Armadale, and to Fastbuck, and to Catherine, who is in Steps, and Rory. And great to hear from Derek, who says a belated Happy New Year. Let's kick out the SNP permanently. Derek is always an optimist as far as that is concerned. And I hope that your New Year wish comes true for that. I think we're all wishing that particular New Year wish about kicking out the SNP. Absolutely. Somebody here doesn't agree with us. Good stuff. We like our people who don't agree with us. We love all our commentators. Please fire in. Please fire in. And let's have a wee look at TikTok here. Now, Owen says, if you want to defend the borders, this is Owen on TikTok, there's no better way than to leave the UK. Well, we understand, Owen, that some people who support separation believe that the SNP is going to somehow, when it's independent, defend Scottish borders. But you would need to show us where they've ever done that, ever, in their entire history. And you do have to look at somebody's track record to make a rough estimation of where they're likely to go in the future. And the SNP has done nothing other than encourage more and more mass immigration into Scotland. So I don't think that they are the ones who are going to deliver it. They will be the ones who will, as we say, collapse Scotland. Show me a single SNP person who has spoken up to defend Scotland's borders, Owen, please. Always About the Money says Scotland is a colony of England. Well, that's an old trope, really. I mean, in what sense do you mean that, really? Seriously, I don't even know where to begin with that one. Lemonade says, how old is the Union? Well, we like to think of the social and cultural unions going right back through time prior to the actual legal union, which was in 1603, which was when the Scottish King, James VI, became king of all parts of the British Isles. And back then in 1603, basically his writ ruled. So what he said, what he said went. So basically, we've had a form of political union since 1603. But then, of course, we had the revolution of 1688. And then by 1707, we actually had a parliamentary union. So you could say that just pick your date, basically. Was it 1707? Was it 1603? One of those two were when the union began. But we like to think that it went right back through time to the point when the inhabitants of the British Isles started to come together in various ways, whether that was dragging stones from all parts of the United Kingdom down to Stonehenge, which in itself was a political operation, which in itself was a form of union. So how long ago was that? So you could look at it and just say, yeah, went right back to as far as we know, which was, how far back can we trace people in the British Isles? 5,000 years, maybe. So we like to talk about our 5,000-year-old union in the sense of the social and cultural union through time, which eventually became the regal union, which eventually became the political union, and which is developing in its own way every day. So thanks for that. Thanks for that question. And anybody else with a question, please fire in. Owen says that if they got independence, the SNP would have served its purpose and it would no longer be a party. Well, Owen, I hate to tell you, but that's not the way that politics works. And you only need to look at the Republic of Ireland as well to see that ever since they had their revolution back in 1916, then the same two parties have controlled the state ever since. And so it's not, so what happens with the revolution is that the winning party, the predominant party, stays and just becomes stronger. So no, it would not have served its purpose, and it would act as a policeman for the revolution, and it would work to condemn anybody who wanted to reunite again. So no, it wouldn't render it inoperative or pointless. It would just strengthen it. And everybody would want a piece of the action, and everybody would join it because they would be the big boy in town. Alan says, will Scotland vote for independence this time or not? Well, thankfully, it's not a referendum, Alan, but it is a Holyrood election, just an election to the Holyrood Parliament in Edinburgh, the devolved Parliament. Will they vote for the SNP? Well, according to the National, this was yesterday, January the 13th, Labour collapse as poll predicts winner of every Scottish seat at Westminster. And this was a poll of 7,500 voters. It was a UK-wide poll, predicted that Keir Starmer's party would return just 41 members of the British Parliament. Fewer than the SNP, which would be on 44, and fewer than the Greens, which would be on 52. My goodness me. This contrasts with the 2024 general elections, where Labour won 411 constituencies, meaning they would fall to just 10% of their current representation. In Scotland, Labour were projected to lose all but 2 of their MPs, Ian Murray in Edinburgh South and Torquil Crichton in the place up north, which I can't unfortunately pronounce, but it's the island region. I think it's the Hebrides, perhaps. So yeah. I mean, SNP could do well, Alan. They could do well at the Holyrood election, but this time round they'll have considerable opposition as well. Good. Now, I don't know if anybody has got any comments on the SNP budget. Stephen says it's a total farce with virtually no merit in it. Well, the front of the Daily Mail today says another spiteful SNP raid on Scots strivers. Which this budget, so-called, which was yesterday, the pre-Holyrood budget, more than 100,000 dragged into higher tax rates. And the critics say that he is prioritising welfare over work. What is meant by that is that quite a few people are looking for tax cuts, which would help to stimulate the economy. And we didn't get any of that. Surprise, surprise. And the taxes have gone up. Basically, it could be said in order to do exactly what? Scottish Conservative finance spokesman Craig Hoy said this budget, like all SNP budgets, is smoke and mirrors, tax and spend, and still prioritises welfare over work, with 650 million extra being spent in the social justice portfolio. The social justice portfolio being, welfare spending and things like that. Well, not to discount that. I mean, welfare spending is necessary. You can't just let people starve. I don't know to what extent there's going to be savings that could be found in that. But what you usually find is that when these government departments try to make savings, they'll make savings on things like, they'll cut the bins, they'll cut the numbers of people who are cleaning the streets that are keeping the place semi-livable. They usually cut the people that we really, really need. Which is the bin men, which is the street sweepers, if they even do that anymore. I was on Great Western Road in Glasgow, big major thoroughfare, a week ago, and I was amazed to see two people attempting, council workers cleaning the pavement. They didn't make a very good job of it because they had like one of these blowers, that blows. They were blowing the leaves into the gutter, and the idea was that the machine coming behind would sweep up the leaves. But I was back up it today, and what a mess they left it in. I mean, just piles of, I was yesterday piles of leaves everywhere and so on. It's just like rubbish. And the other side of the road hasn't been done. So you do wonder what's going on. I mean, I would happily, if they said, Alistair, could you clean Great Western Road? We'll give you a shovel. We'll give you some black bags and we'll just let you get on with it. I'd love to do that job. I'd love to do that out in the weather. Easy work, basically, cleaning up leaves. Great job. Great job. Anyway, it's all beyond us, apparently, in our new AI world. Oksana says, Reform are now a washout with Zahawi. Well, do you know, we're going to talk about Zahawi because this is an amazingly ridiculous story. We're going to talk about that with our guest coming up at the bottom of the hour, Damien Davies. Stephen just brings us back to something that I was talking about earlier. Stephen says there was a kind of union under Cromwell. Yes, there was. That was in the 17th century. That was after the Union of Crowns, when Cromwell had his British Commonwealth, as he called it. And yeah, that was definitely a kind of political union. It didn't last for very long, though. But that was definitely something that I could speak about. That came before the Parliamentary Union and after the Regal Union. Good. Thanks for bringing that back up again. Now, Stephen also says, in relation to what's happening this May at Holyrood, whatever may happen, even if it was an SNP executive, Holyrood elections still cannot mandate independence. And Stephen had an article on that, which was a good one. It's on our facebook.com/UK A Force for Good website. Please do check that one out. It was published, I think it was yesterday actually, about exactly how Holyrood elections can't mandate independence. Mark over here on TikTok says, do you think reform is bad for the union? Had that discussion a couple of weeks ago, Mark. It could be, if nobody in Scotland voted for it. But if it got a substantial number of people in Scotland voting for it, then it probably wouldn't make a whole lot of difference. At the end of the day, though, it depends what they do in Westminster. If they did get into power in Westminster, and if they continued to, like if they took Britain to war and, you know, major events like that, then yeah, that would be bad for the union, just as Tony Blair's Iraq intervention was bad for the union also. And at the time, very bad for the union. Gosh, yeah. So, you know, potentially it could be, but it depends upon what their policies are, because at the end of the day, the way it goes in Westminster is what happens in Scotland. Scotland will react to what happens down there. And in fact, there's no major event. There's no major event that has ever created support for independence in Scotland that's ever happened in Scotland. Any event that creates a drive for independence in Scotland is always a result of an event that's happened in England. You can take that to the bank. That's always been the case. And I read this as well. A Scottish nationalist pointed this out in the national newspaper. And just when I want to pull it out and tell everybody about it, I can't find the actual cutting because I've got so many here. As I say, this isn't GB News. This is A Force for Good, doing the best that we can with what we've got. But there's no major event in Scotland that has ever created a desire for independence. Any major event that's ever created a desire for independence has been an event that's happened in England, usually at the British Parliament level. Rafa says the Scottish National Political Party will collapse Scotland forever. John Swinney turned into Joe Biden number 2 of this nation. Scots need to take action to sack and remove this man now. Well, let's do it in 4 months' time when we have the democratic opportunity to do exactly that, Rafa. Oksana's upset with her MP. Useless, you can't even oppose the council's parking plans. Is that in East Glasgow? I was reading about that today. Front page story of the Evening News. Paul says, Labour are cancelling elections in southern Britain. Aren't they just using the excuse of reorganising ward boundaries? Yeah, they are. Ridiculous. Good. Well, Rafa wonders if the Tory leader is a good candidate for the First Minister of Scotland. Well, we'll reserve judgment on that, other than to say that, unfortunately for him, unfortunately for Mr. Findlay, he's not going to be in the running for that, is he? Although if there was a coalition, perhaps he might stand a chance of being like a deputy or something like that in a coalition cabinet. But certainly he's not going to be First Minister, certainly not unless something amazing happens in the next 4 months. Yes, Oksana says it's the parking scenario in the east of Glasgow. Good to see Slimian back for another episode. Good. Folks, we have got our man coming up. Damien Davies. Just in a minute or two. Ken worries that the English are going to drag the Scots down with them. I think we all worry that Britain could be dragged down by bad leadership. That's what concerns us all. And hopefully that's not going to happen. We have to hope and pray that the politicians do their best and that sensible ones can arise. But, politics is a difficult game, and you can't please everybody all the time. And sometimes don't put your faith in men, as they say, because men will let you down, because we're only human. And that's not me that said that. That's just a fact of reality. But do your best just to hope and pray for the best for the country, because we are in a difficult situation going forward. No question about it. And constant wars and rumors of wars and all that kind of stuff does no good for the human soul. And we've got to stay out of that as much as possible if we can. Stay out of wars, that is. Because we never benefit. I was thinking about that today. Our country just never benefits from these international conflicts. Never benefits. Like, literally, how do you and I benefit? We don't. We never benefit. The country just comes out weaker, whatever it does. Anyway, enough of that. Where is our man Damien? Come on, Damien, we're waiting for you. Now, folks, on TikTok, we are going to have to leave you because we're going to be speaking to our man Damien, and you won't be able to see him here on TikTok. But thanks very much for all the questions. Ken, yes, we agree with you. We do agree with you on that. And the UK, he says here, is the American lapdog. Well, the American Israel lapdog, certainly, and we always have been. But we'll have to see how we progress on that going forward. Now, we're going to have to say goodbye to you all on TikTok. Please do, if you want to see the rest of the show, go over to youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Okay, saying goodbye to our TikTok people. Well, thank you to Patriot Dan 1979 for the £5, who says, keep up the good work, Alistair. Do appreciate that. Now, folks, if you want to give us a super chat on YouTube, just click on the $sign below the video, and you can do that. Now, I've got a message here. We're trying to get our man Damien to come in. I think he's having technological differences at his end, but I will continue to chat to you. Talking of which, does anybody know this story? This is ridiculous. Arrest at protest against Castle's deeply offensive Redcoat Cafe name. Now, there's a small group of ne'er-do-wells who have been upset that there's a cafe in Edinburgh Castle called the Redcoat Cafe. They ignore the fact that there's also the events room is called the Jacobite Room. Okay. They ignore the subtlety of that. And because they're Scottish, a certain type of Scottish nationalist, they protest this name. And they were getting up to it again, apparently, on Monday, the 12th of January. And there's a picture that we've got of them. And I just want to bring up the picture. And I'll get to the point here. There it is. Redcoats made war against 170 countries. So basically, they're not complaining here. They're not complaining, okay, about just the British Redcoats during the Jacobite conflict. They're actually complaining about the British Army, which were known as Redcoats for many years. But what it says here is, Police Scotland confirmed one arrest has been made, quote, in connection with public indecency. So I was like, I studied law, and I'm like, I think that's a fairly major charge, right? So I Googled what is public indecency, and we'll put up the quote of what it is. And it's a common law offence covering indecent conduct in public or visible from a public place, like exposing genitals or engaging in sexual acts, focusing on affronting public morals rather than necessarily causing distress, though intent for gratification or alarm can be key. Okay. So what I want to know is, what on earth was this group of demonstrators up to? I've seen nothing about it other than this report in the National, where one of these people were arrested for public indecency. It's the oddest story. If anybody knows anything else about that, please tell us. Now, Karina Parks, thank you for your £5 super chat. That's really, really very much appreciated. Thank you for that. Anybody else, please click on the button. Anyway, let's bring in our man, Damien. Say hello to Damien, folks.
Hello.
Hi there, Damien. Good. Glad you could make it. Well, we've got a lot to chat about this evening.
We have indeed.
You're down there in Reform Central, basically, Rung and Helmsby.
I am indeed.
And I would like to pick your brains today, specifically about what your thoughts are on the big story which was on X on Monday, when, now let me bring up the guy's name because it's easy to get this one wrong. Nadim Zahawi, former Chancellor, am I right? Former Chancellor under Boris?
I think so, and I think he had something to do with certain safe and effective medical interventions a few years ago, possibly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. A very controversial character. There's no question about it.
Yeah. Iraqi born as well.
And my point is, I don't really understand why they thought it was a good idea to bring this guy on. Now, just in case some of us don't know exactly who this is, I don't know if we've lined up a picture of the man himself, but do we have anything there of this chap? Let's just see. Well, yes, we did have a text that he made. That's him there. Some people might recognize him. This is a text, a tweet that he made from 10 years ago. He says, it doesn't actually make grammatical sense because I'm not British born, Mr. Nigel Farage. I am as British as you are. Okay. Your comments are offensive and racist. I would be frightened to live in country run by you. I'm not sure if that was before or after he was appointed the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but I hope that or the Home Secretary rather, but I hope that his diplomatic skills are better than his English grammar. Anyway, he was very much an opponent of Nigel Farage back then. However, what happened on Monday is that he was welcomed with flying colours into the ranks of reform. And I would like to know if you have any idea why they would think that he was a good idea.
Now, me personally, as I said, without getting into a reform bashing session,
yeah, we're not bashing reform as such.
Is it a choice I would have made? No, I wouldn't have made that choice personally. The optics are awful, and I can acknowledge that. I can also acknowledge that he did have experience in cabinet, so he knows how things work. He does have an inside track, and he probably knows some of the shortcuts that they can navigate around if they want to get our version of executive orders through, which are orders in council, if he wants to actually get things done, and maybe curtail any potential judicial reviews that the civil service may want to throw up when reform gets in. I think most people in the country know that Reform UK are going to be the next British government at this point. It's just there's a haggling over what form that government will take. And that's pretty much the go. In my view, the Tories aren't getting back in, Labour aren't getting back in, the Lib Dems, who are they? And I do literally think it's the reform show. And that's why they've got a lot of people defecting over from the legacy parties. It's not just the Tories, by the way. They're getting defections from the Lib Dems. They've had defections from the Greens. So it's pretty much everyone's jumping off the sinking ship. So strategically, the optics are piss poor, pardon the language. It's awful, and I can't even try to justify it. If you're looking at it from a pragmatic point of view, you could think, well, he was the Tory, and he knows that basically they're hampered by the Blurite states that set up in 1997, that they can't actually get anything through because they've locked all sides, either by the civil service, by the Supreme Court, by the devolved assemblies, all basically throwing their hands in the air saying you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. So they're of the mindset that most of the devolved not the devolved institutions, but most of the Blurite institutions, whether that's Ofcom, whether that's the OBR, whether that is the Online Safety Act, whether that is the Communications Act, Online Communications Act, I think of the early 2000s, anything essentially that Tony Blair had his greasy fingerprints on needs to be removed. Maybe he's seen the error of his ways. I'm the eternal optimist. I can look at it from that angle and I can say, well, maybe they've realised, because Liz Truss has been on like a apology tour since she's not been Prime Minister, saying, well, we need to go nuclear on the Blairite state. Now, a lot of people are kicking off about the optics of Nadeem Zahawi coming over. I'm more concerned about them revealing their hands so early into this parliamentary cycle. They've actually declared war on the Blairite institutions, and they've actually said, "We're coming for you. You're going to be abolished when we get in." And that gives the blob, the civil service, and the establishment chance to try and fireproof it, and to try and stop the reforms that are actually needed to make the country work again. And let's not forget our old friends, the UCHR and the Human Rights Act of 1998. Those need to go as well. It's just, that's the mistake. Everyone's focusing on Nadeem Zahawi as he's the big mistake. And yeah, optically, it is really bad. But I've argued this on my channel as well. The actual story that people are overlooking is they've declared war on the Blairite states, and they've actually declared their intention. I think that was a strategic error. That's just me.
Interesting take. Are you saying there that you think the appointment of this chap is part of a war against the Blairite state? And
Yeah.
if so, how would he be useful in that effort?
Well, he's got a foot in government. He knows how it all works, so we may potentially know of routes and off ramps, political shortcuts to get things through. Because Nigel Farage, lest we forget that he's new to Parliament. He's been in the public eye for 30 years, but he's going to become an MP in 2024. What parliamentary experience have they actually got in terms of getting things through? The only person who I was really impressed with under the last Tory government was Danny Kruger. When he defected over from the Tories to Reform either late last year, I'm quite impressed because he was one of the new intake from Boris Johnson's election in 2019 that talked a lot of sense, but they were obstructed. And basically, when David Cameron came in 2010, his biggest mistake was running with the Blairite project and not actually getting rid of anything that Tony Blair set up. That was their big mistake, that they ran with it for 14 years. And that's why we can't deport illegal migrants. We can't do this. We can't do that. We can't do that, because we've got this new invention that was only created in 2009, the Supreme Court standing above Parliament saying, well, you can't do that. That's unlawful. Lest we forget that in our particular system, Parliament is sovereign, or meant to be sovereign. The King and Parliament is sovereign. There's meant to be no higher authority. And yet we're hampered by judicial reviews. We're hampered by the Supreme Court. We're hampered by the UCHR. All of this nonsense needs to go.
Right. He was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He wasn't the Home Secretary. He was the Chancellor of the Exchequer between July 22 and September 22. But then he was also before then he was Secretary of State for Education, Minister for Intergovernmental Relations, Minister for Equalities, and then he got appointed the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for the C vaccine deployment.
We'll call it the jibby jab. We'll call it the jibby jab.
Jibby jab, yeah, the jibby jab deployment. And we can't say the C word because we could get sanctioned by YouTube. So he was the Parliamentary Under Secretary, and it's fair to say he did not, in many people's eyes, commend himself or conduct himself very well on that. A lot of people to this day don't like the fact that he did it and consider what he was doing to be quite totalitarian, because he was the one who wanted and really kind of enforced young people 12 and over to get the jibby jabby. And for many of us, myself included, that was just unacceptable behavior.
Me personally,
we're not even in danger.
I agree. It was a governmental overreach, and we know all about governmental overreaches under Tusi Akia. So I would completely agree with that. But you can look at that on the macro level, on the broad scope on what reform is doing, and you can have concerns. That's perfectly natural. People can be afraid. You should be afraid. I'd be afraid of another government of Keir Starmer, to be honest, or this Labour government. That scares me more. So it's right that we have concerns. It's right that we can have these conversations. And dissent is normal. Dissent is it's a natural thing that we should all be doing. So when people complain about certain, I don't even want to say a mistake at this point. We'll have to see how it plays out. Certain decisions that the leadership of Reform are making on the macro level, we can all have concerns about that. And as I say, that's perfectly reasonable. What I can say from a micro level, because I'm actually in a Reform constituency, is that my MP, Sarah Pochin, is a breath of fresh air. She can go on national TV and she can say that people of colour, ethnic minorities, are disproportionately represented in the media. I don't know if you remember that story from a few months ago.
Yeah.
She can actually, mention that she doesn't want migrants in her constituency, illegal migrants. She doesn't want accommodation in my constituency, Buncombe House, be given to migrants. She's visible in the constituency. She's responsive, i.e., she actually answers emails and letters that are sent to her. And she is very, very public with right-leaning tendencies, which is it's a joy to behold, especially if you're in a red wall seat. She's the best MP that we've had for 50 years. And I can look at all of this and say, yeah, you can have these concerns on a national level about what Reform's doing. But on the microcosm, when you factor it down, politics is meant to be bottom up, not top down. So my voice in the Runcorn constituency in a Reform seat, this is the voice that people should be listening to, in my opinion, because this is a real testimonial to the difference that a right-leaning MP can make. Lest we forget, the way that our party political system is, my previous MP, Mike Amesbury, and my previous MP before that, Derek Twigg, they would never respond to your concerns about immigration or anything like that if it's away from the party line, because they would lose the whip. They would not be selected at the next elections to represent Labour again. That's how they maintain party discipline. That's how they just think, right, if it's not a pet project of mine, I'm not going to speak out about it. Your classic backbench Labour MP or any MP, if it's not something that's been pre-approved by party leadership, they won't even speak out about it because they will lose the whip and they'll be deselected come the next election cycle. People don't think about these things, so people can have these major concerns about Reform. And as I say, that's right. We've got 3 years till the next election, of course. That's perfectly reasonable. But from a micro level, from a bottom up level, she's the best MP we've ever had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think people looking at the responses on X anyway, and one shouldn't always take X as in any sense reflective of everybody in any way, but it's certainly instructive to an extent. Generally speaking,
I would say maybe 10% of the public use X, so you can take it as 10%, maybe 20%. You can say, right, okay, all right, that's an opinion. It's not the opinion. It's a opinion. You can remember that many people are plugged into the interwebs and many people are plugged into online. Many people aren't. Many people still trust the ITV or your STV and your BBC and your Channel 4s.
Very much so, very much so. And at the end of the day, how many people know who this Zahawi fellow is? People like you and I know because we're political, we're keen on politics.
We're political junkies, let's be clear.
Political junkies. And of the political junkies, how many of them take the view on Zahawi that we do, especially related to the jibby-jabby carry-on? Probably a minority of them. But most people out there, and this is what people like Richard Tice and Nigel Farage understand, they're like, most people don't know who this guy is. They hear that he was the ex-chancellor of the Exchequer. They won't remember what happened under the jibby-jabby. They won't remember any of that. They're just going to vote for Nigel because he's Nigel.
And I'll bring up
and that's kind of the end of the story, really.
I'll bring up this very clear point as well. Right, okay. Say, for example, you had a politically clued in person, a politically astute person, like me and you, trying to make the argument on a doorstep that you can't vote for Nadeem Zahawi because he's not British, he was born in Iraq. They would think you're racist, rightly or wrongly. and you probably get the door slammed in your face. So you can look at it from that angle. There may be a argument to be had about British people, i.e. English, Scots, Irish or Welsh people representing their own people, about demographic replacements. But how much of that is actually filtered into the public conversation to the normies, to your boomers, to my mum or my auntie that's not on X? If you turn around and say to them, right, I don't like him because he's brown, we can't vote for him because he was a Tory, they might just switch off, and you can look at it from that point of view as well. And they're like, all right, oh, you're the racist uncle, are you? Okay.
It is true, though. I mean, most people, whether you accept it or not, they tend not to vote on those issues. Like, they tend not to vote on race or religion issues.
Unless you're from the religion of peace.
Yeah,
the religion of peace.
Even then, you'll get a lot of people who vote for you as well. So they'll just tend to vote for what the person goes under, whether that's Tory, Labour, Reform, what have you. And but there's an interesting point. I mean, because I thought, well, what's Reform got to offer? What's Zahawi got to offer? And he's not bringing any celebrity or glamour, really. He's not bringing any great intellect or charm or eloquence or academic history. You know, he's not bringing out any of these things. He's not even bringing in any supporters. I mean, he's not even bringing in the Muslim vote, for example. He's not going to make any difference to whether Muslims vote for Reform or not. I can't imagine anyway. So what is he bringing Reform? And I thought, well, it must be access that he's bringing. Access either to money or to diplomatic avenues. And I think you nailed it there when you said basically he understands how government works, and he can maybe help the Nigel Farages of this world carry out some kind of cleaning of the stables as far as the civil service is concerned. I think that's the optimistic view. That's the only view that makes sense that I've heard. So that you could be onto something there.
I mean, there was a post. I mean, there was a story a couple of days ago that basically stated that the civil servants would be uncomfortable following instructions from Reform UK, and there would be mass walkouts. They would have to resign. And to that, I would say, well, I wouldn't want you to do anything you feel uncomfortable with. Here's your severance package. I'll see you later. It's as simple as that. The civil service is meant to be impartial. They're not there to have a political opinion. They're there to implement the will of the government, the elected government. You know what I mean? They've got no business saying, well, we're trying to pressurise any government of any stripe to say we're not going to implement, or we wouldn't feel comfortable implementing what you're telling us to do. That's not their job. Their job is to do what they've been told to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So there could be a mass clear out of the civil service. The civil service could be shrunk right down. Danny Krug has been very clear on this. At the moment, two of the most powerful people in the country are people that you probably never heard of, and that's the private secretary to the Prime Minister and the private secretary to the Cabinet. They actually deliver pre-approved and pre-prepared speeches to the Cabinet. They don't take the decisions that they should be taking for the country anymore. So essentially, they go out, and when the parroting lines like diversity is our strength, don't look back in anger, yet another terrorist attack, blah, blah, blah. That's all pre-approved by the deep state, by the permanent bureaucracy. What Reform actually wants to do, and they actually mentioned this when Danny Kruger came on board, they want to make those positions political appointments rather than entrenched in the civil service. It'd be very similar to what Trump's done in America, meaning they have to take direct instruction from the Prime Minister of the political stripe. We've not had that since 1997, where the civil service are actually delivering what they should be delivering, which is the will of the electorate. So even if they get through some of these minor issues through, if they get through some of these minor issues, major reforms through, like making these political appointments, that is what I'm focused on. People are getting bogged down with the minutiae of, oh, I didn't like this, I didn't like that. I can think more big picture. If they get rid of the Supreme Court, restore the law lords, make these political appointments, slim down the civil service, maybe curtail the most excesses of devolution, leave the ECHR. If they can get all of this through, Farage, for all his faults, would be one of the best prime ministers we've had in a good long while.
It's that would be true, absolutely. If they could do that, it would be fantastic. And at the moment, is they are the only game in town, really.
And I've mentioned this on my channel as well. It's about viability. Show me another vehicle with momentum. People look at Advance UK, maybe UKIP, Homeland Party. Some people know what that is. I didn't until a few months ago. It's like, have they got the profile and the visibility to actually get in? I would say no, not currently. And that's not a slight against Ben Habib. He makes all the right sounds. He's articulate. He's the example of an assimilated man of foreign ethnicity that has actually made a contribution to Britain. All these are positive things. But tell Joe Public on the street who Ben Habib is, and they're like, who? What? Who's that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some people have no idea how difficult it is to even begin to get off the back foot when you're trying to set up a political party and to get any kind of momentum. And again, like it or not, it also needs a whole lot of money, millions and millions and millions of pounds to get any kind of momentum. And I mean, I don't like the fact that in our democracy it needs millions and millions of pounds, but it does need millions and millions of pounds. And so unless you've got that, then what have you got? And I mean, you've also got to have a clear things that you're fighting for. As you say, what the manifesto that you just articulated there, you know, these are clear bullet points that the party could come in and do. And do the other parties have clear bullet points about what they intend to do?
They've specifically said they are going to war with Tony Blair's managerial state. They've made specific announcements that they want to make ministerial appointments of the permanent secretaries of the cabinet and the prime minister. They need to be, and probably the head of the civil service as well. There needs to be political appointments, so they're in hock to the government and not the entrenched bureaucracy. Because at the moment you've got the civil service and their biggest aim is to protect themselves. It's not to deliver what the government's been elected to deliver. That's a secondary or a tertiary issue for them. They're there to preserve the Blair legacy, and that's what needs to be challenged. And that's what they've said they want to do. And as I say, they've also said that they want to slim it right down. And these are all things we can get on board with. Leave the ECHR, deport the illegals. All of these things are what people on the right have wanted for decades. So as I say, that's what I'm focused on at the moment, because they've made declarations of intent.
Declarations of intent, exactly. That's true. Whether they can get it through, let's hope so. But certainly there's...
Well, this is the thing, as I've mentioned previously, Alistair, Kingdom Parliament is sovereign. That is, the Prime Minister can get anything through with political will and a disciplined party with a majority.
Exactly.
So when the Tories, when they got the 80-seat majority under Boris, we can't do this, we're not allowed. No, I call bullshit on that. That is about party discipline. You needed to get all of the Lib Dems out of the Tory party, and you might have got some of the stuff through.
Yes, if there had been any intention of getting any of that stuff through. But yeah, the old parties have really kind of disgraced themselves. So we're going to have to see. Getting a few good comments coming in here tonight. Quite a few coming in. Let me just see. There's one or two that I wanted to read out. Derek says, "Great show, guys. Great show and debate again." Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
Now, what others? Quite a few to have to scroll through. Here you go. Damien is spitting facts. Local and national is always different. My local area is a joke.
Thank you for that.
Good. And a few people debating each other also in the comments. As Catherine says, yes, there must be a reason why Nigel nabbed him. Otherwise, why would he bother? And I think we've heard at least a reason that makes sense to me from Damien tonight. Derek wishes you a happy new year.
Happy New Year, Derek. Thank you.
I hope it's a productive one for yourself as well, Damien. I'm sure it will be. You've got a very good YouTube channel, which just as we end the interview, the chat here, will just bring up it. It's at youtube.com/@ CheshireCatMusings, all one word.
Somebody on my channel today actually wanted to know what the name of the channel is about. Cheshire Cat Musing. Why? So I mentioned it. It's because I live in Cheshire, and Cheshire Cat is obviously from the Lewis Carroll book, Alice in Wonderland. And Lewis Carroll's actually from Daresbury, which is in my constituency of Runcorn and Helsby. It's not technically part of Runcorn, but it's in the constituency, and that is a civil parish on the way to Warrington. So that's why I picked the name Cheshire Cat Musings, because it's very local. And as I say, I'm all about bottom down rather than top down. And it's very specific to my area, which is why I chose it. And it's quintessentially English and British. And it's I always see myself as British, and I'll always see myself as from Cheshire. So that's why.
Quite right. And in fact, when your show starts, do you still have the Cheshire flag at the beginning of it?
Yeah, Cheshire, then England, then Britain.
Yes, there you go. That's the bottom-up attitude. Damien, it's the top of the hour. Thanks very much for coming in tonight. We'll have you again on at least a couple of times anyway. Well, we'll have you on at least once a month anyway, between now and the Holyrood election. And the English Council elections, of course, which are happening on the same day, 7th of May.
Well, hopefully TCK won't cancel them all. So, hopefully.
Yeah. Good.
We'll see what happens, but yeah, definitely. Well, when we get closer to your local elections or your assembly elections, I'm sure we'll get into that discussion as well.
Totally. Okay. Until then, thanks very much, folks. Let's say goodbye to Damien. Good night.
Thank you.
Damien Davies of the YouTube channel at CheshireCatMusings. Great fellow. Always got interesting insights. I hadn't thought too much about the ability of Zahawi to maybe know how the deep state operates. Are we being too optimistic when we think that? Perhaps, I don't know, but certainly an explanation that would make a certain degree of sense. Thank you to Damien for that. Derek says, great show. Thank you. All right. Good. Okay, folks. Well, we will be back next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And we'll have another guest also next Wednesday. Looking forward to that. And until then, let's wish for the very best for us all. And it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.